Hello, I'm Dave Feinlieb, and this is Beyond the Shelf. This show is an open exploration of the people and process behind e-commerce. Through conversations with innovators in the space, we learn the stories of these leaders and their strategies for e-commerce success. You can find out more about how we're helping leading brands and retailers like Pepsi and Instacart build retail media and product detail page content faster than ever before at itsrapid.ai. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Shelf. Everyone loves to analyze. It's human nature. We ponder, we pontificate, and we predict. And every once in a while, we get it right. Predictions and projections are key factors in building out a business model, and no one knows this better than today's guest, Andrew Lipsman. Andrew joined us last year to talk about retail marketing, retail media, and the future of branded content, and is back today to answer some of the questions he's asked most when it comes to being an analyst. Please welcome back independent analyst and consultant, Andrew Lipsman. Andrew, great to have you back on the show.
Dave, thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it.
Let's get right into it. Analyst, what does the word mean? What's the job? What's the role?
Analyst, right? It applies to so many contexts. So in some sense, it's vague, but the type of analyst that I am and I've been, I would say is sort of a relatively small subset of the industry and a handful of analyst firms that people are familiar with, like eMarketer, Forrester, Gartner. And then there's an increasing and growing number of independent analysts, which is what I am now. I think it's about being able to distill and make sense of what's happening in the marketplace that you cover, and being able to guide your audience's thinking in the direction and maybe more specifically predicting the future. You have to be somewhat of a futurist. I would say what goes hand in hand with that is also being very calibrated and making sure that you really look at the variables that determine what's most likely to happen next.
Just to refresh our audience, did you always have an appetite for this kind of work? How'd you get into it? What was your start in doing this role?
Well, I think, I can't say that I had a deliberate intention to become an analyst. I think the beginnings of where it started to happen for me was in my time at ComScore, which I started in my mid-20s. I was on a small marketing team and I was wearing a couple of hats there. One of them was comms and PR. So I was working with a lot of journalists and then also driving marketing insights. We really used our data to do marketing, right? We never actually paid for advertising. Like literally, we never spent a dime on advertising because we used data so well to market our brand. And we were on a path to IPO. So my mandate going in there was like, get our name out there as much as possible and build the ComScore brand. So that's what I did. And it was fun for me to look at the data and then publish it in a way that would help drive stories. But I also got inbound from a lot of journalists. And so I started to develop a relationship and I had to often get them quick answers. They were on deadlines. And so I'd have to find the data and give it to them. And what I found by virtue of that relationship is, one, I learned how to think a little bit more like journalists, how they frame topics and how they write about it. But also I had to become kind of a de facto analyst for the company because I had to speak to a lot of the trends. Often I would kick it over to a specific expert, depending on what the story was. But a lot of times, most of the articles back then were like about MySpace and Facebook and the rise of YouTube and things that.
Right.
And we didn't necessarily have specialists on those trends. So I covered a lot of that stuff that was more general interest in the rise of digital. And then it's like the repetitions, the 1,000 hours of putting in, talking to journalists and pulling data. You kind of become an analyst, even though that was never really my title there.
So you developed this kind of muscle memory, if you will. And you mentioned another word earlier, predictions and thinking about the future. Will you tell us about that? First of all, does it make you nervous to predict the future, or you enjoy doing that?
I love making predictions, right? It's always risky. And I think I would say, one, I feel like there's less pressure in the sense that most predictions are wrong, right? And not even
That's
like
great.
they're directionally wrong.
Yeah, right.
Like it's very hard to predict. The first thing, get the direction of the prediction right.
Yeah.
Then try and figure out the magnitude of the prediction, right? How big will this thing be ultimately?
Yeah.
And then the last thing and the hardest, I'd say it's almost impossible to do, is get the timing right. So if you get those first two ballpark correct, you've made a pretty good prediction.
Yeah.
So, I think I feel comfortable being able to hit the mark or be in the ballpark on those two things. And then, if I get the timing right, I'm probably just being lucky at that point. The other thing about getting predictions wrong is I kind of love getting predictions wrong, because the way that I come up with predictions or try to project what's going to happen is I'm always trying to figure out what the key variables are that determine the future. And in my head, I have this idea that I simplify it into thinking there's probably three key variables, right? First variable represents, let's say, 40% of where this trend's going to go. The next one is 20%. The next one is 10%. If I can get those three pretty much right, I've got 70% of what I need in information to get the prediction right. And so I focus a lot on those multiple variables. And then if I make that prediction and it's wrong, it means I've missed something critical. And that I actually crave that, because what that means is I immediately go in, why did I get this wrong? What was the thing I missed? Okay, you figure it out, and then it becomes a new model that you can apply to future predictions. So every chance that you have to be wrong is actually the step change that you take in being a better analyst.
It's so great. And being able to kind of incorporate this feedback loop is something that came naturally for you, or did you have to learn it?
I think it's probably just a way that my mind works a little bit. I obsess about cause and effect. And I just feel like there's a lot of conventional wisdom out there that's not always right. And it's because we map to the wrong variables. I think that where predictions mostly go wrong is there's an impulse to see the first thing that seems parallel to this instance, and you map to that one variable. And if you don't get it right, you're going to be wrong. And a lot of times it's directionally wrong. So I like to look for those things that are sitting below the surface, but they're actually very determinative of what's going to happen. And I try and lean into those.
I love it. So we're going to talk a little later about predictions for 2025, of course, but I'd love it if you'd share with us a couple of your favorite predictions that you've made that were right on the money, and maybe one or two that you got wrong and you learned something from.
So a couple of the ones that come to mind as being good predictions, and I'll take you through the process of how I arrived at them. One of them, and I'm on record over the last year or two saying this a number of times on a podcast, on the eMarketer podcast. I was saying pretty strongly that I did not think that there was going to be a recession. And it got to the point where everybody had assumed there was going to be a recession. It was a given. 100% of economists polled said there was going to be a recession. I kept saying over and over, I'm like, I'm willing to change my mind on this if I see some of the key variables change, but I'm not seeing it yet. And what I was drawing upon was my past experience in analyzing e-commerce, which was the most important variable in consumer spending growth was very simply, do people have money in their pockets? If they have it, they spend it. Where does that money come from? Being employed. So when the labor environment is strong, which it was through all of this, people had money in their pockets. People were, there was a vibes recession. People were kind of angry about inflation, and they were certainly getting less for their dollar. But in terms of the overall growth, there was nothing that signaled that consumer spending wasn't going to continue to be, solid to strong. And so I said, when I see real material changes in the labor environment shift, I'll adjust my thinking. But it never happened. I think also people were colored by headlines. You see all these headlines of tech companies laying off, thousands of people. But like in the grand scheme of the economy, it's a drop in the bucket.
So you think about what's below the surface. You were right about where we are. And what's an example of one where you made a prediction, didn't go the way you had planned, and you were able to think about those underlying variables?
So I'm writing an article right now where I pulled up my first report on retail media networks from 2019, and at the time, before everything had manifested, I had seen that there was going to be, on-site retail media, off-site retail media, and in-store. And but I was rereading my prediction on in-store, and the thing that I got really wrong was I said in-store is going to happen this way. You're going to have screens in stores, and it's going to have to communicate in some way with your mobile device through some sort of technology in order to understand who you are and deliver you those personalized ads in store. I assumed, because that was the way that other forms of retail media worked, that it would have to be applied this one-to-one framework in the store. I've completely shifted my thinking now. I think it should be treated as a mass media channel, and I actually think it will set it back really badly if we have personalized ads in store. You can have them on smartphones, you can have them on smart carts because those are personal devices. But if you have them on big screens, I mean, can you imagine somebody walking by and getting ads for things that your preferences are being broadcast to everyone around?
Yeah.
It's really bad customer experience. And the variable I was missing was I had never really had experience in retail. I'd spent a lot of time in e-commerce, but physical retail was not really part of my experience. So I missed it. And then I learned it through experience, through talking to a lot of retailers. And now I've been able to apply it to the way that I talk about the emergence of that space today.
Now, to zoom out on that, I want to, for our listeners, put that in the context, which is you did call retail media and this huge, back to your point about directional, I think you were maybe the first, or at least one of the first, to say this is really going to be a completely different space that people are going to invest in. So I wanted to make sure I got the hat tip on that part.
Thanks. You know what the simple insight there? It was as simple as just knowing that I came from measurement world, and I saw so clearly how dollars follow measurement, right? Google was the first one to illustrate that online, and it wasn't until Facebook really moved to a performance medium that dollars were going to flow in a big way. And so once I realized what was happening at Amazon, it was like self-evident. I was like, oh, it's Google ads on steroids.
And then you're going to measure it.
Right. And then I was like, and every other retailer can do their own version of this. So it was that moment. It was just a light bulb. And, but again, people don't think measurement's boring to talk about, but it's actually a really powerful force if you think about the history of digital advertising.
Talk to us about, I want to incorporate a little bit of Andrew Lipsman's analytical and predictive capabilities into my own career, my personal life. Any rules for the road or suggestions for how we can do that?
I mean, I think just trying to develop an intuition for the variables that really matter. First off, they're buried everywhere. You can find signals if you're looking for it. There's like a sleuthing. Pouring through earnings transcripts, you're going to find kernels of things that the CEO says that you realize is a clear signal. And most people will gloss over that. They won't think twice about it. They'll follow the headline earning, which is like their revenue grew this much or the stock tanked. But there's real insight embedded within it. So just learning how to read between the lines, and it can be applied to any context, including the progression of your own career, figuring out what really makes people successful. And once you figure that out, I think you can get there much quicker.
Great insight. Now, last time we had you on the show here at Beyond the Shelf, you were pretty early on in your journey with media, ads, and commerce. How's it been as a founder, and how's life been? What have you learned, and what are you working on?
It's really fun. It's fun to be able to execute the vision I had in my mind of doing this type of analysis, and being able to go into whatever direction I want to go or produce content in whatever format I think will make sense. So just having this idea in my mind and then executing it and seeing it come to reality is really fun. There's so much happening in the space that every moment is fun. Every interaction is fun, talking to people and just understanding what's going on. And then I think one of the most gratifying things in going off on my own is simply how much support you get from people, how much people want to see you succeed. And I really appreciate that. I mean, from the earliest days, I felt like there was, just a whole ecosystem of people who wanted to help make it happen for me. The other thing is you get a lot of friendly advice. And one of the things I've had to learn is even when it's people who you respect a tremendous amount, how to take good advice and also leave good advice if it doesn't align with what you have in your mind. Because everybody, I think, has different objectives. Some people might have the idea of, what does it take to build a business? I don't really want to build. Some people might think, how do you get this to a place where it can be acquired? I don't really want to be acquired. Right. So everybody's motivations are different, but there's a lot of good advice. And I think it's a process to figure out which of it to follow.
I'm just super appreciative of all the work that you're doing, and also that you took the leap to go and kind of build this and get this out there. So thanks for doing it, and for all the predictions and ideas that you're sharing with the community. Now, I want to talk about your insights on retail media. Of course, you wrote this article in Adweek. 2025 is going to be an even bigger year. The industry is going to grow from 26 billion to 166 billion globally. Big numbers. First of all, talk to us about retail media. What does it encompass now? And then tell us about these numbers.
Sure. So I'll go back to the original frame: on-site, off-site, and in-store. And I'll break them down really quickly. Right, on-site is where the bulk of the dollars have gone today. Most of it to Amazon, and it's those sponsored product ads. But also something that I think gets overlooked is the sponsored brand and sponsored brand video ads. One of the things I learned this year through talking to some really smart folks in incrementality measurement is that those actually drive the most incremental return.
Yeah.
Brands don't often invest in them because they're more expensive and they don't drive as many clicks, but they actually drive sales. And the most incremental is actually conquesting. So if you have conquesting on sponsored brands, that's very expensive on a CPC basis, but it's also where you will actually grow your sales. So there's a ton of value that's still there. That's where the growth has happened. It's actually where most of the growth is going to happen over the next few years as well. But we're also seeing the emergence of offsite, which is, programmatic offsite using retailers' purchase and shopping data for targeting. Streaming TV, we've seen a lot of streaming TV partnerships, and then other publisher partnerships, whether it's something like Best Buy and CNET, or in many more cases, RMNs partnering with the big social platforms. And then in-store is digital screens moving into the store. I mentioned smart carts, smartphones, but also, digital signage starting to proliferate. And by the way, this is already ubiquitous in Europe and parts of Asia. Every other market is actually well ahead of the US. We have some weird dynamics in this market that have prevented it from taking off more quickly than it probably should have. But it's a huge opportunity, one that, it sort of quick and dirty calculation came up, it should be like a $20 billion market. And yet today it's only a few hundred million.
And the growth that we talked about here, you've got on-site, you've got off-site, you've got in-store, and in all its different forms. Where do you think that as a brand, I might want to allocate my dollars, or how do I think about planning across those three different channels?
Here's what I would do if I were a brand. Okay. So there are a lot of dollars that go into sponsored product ads, and then more specifically, sponsored product branded ads. Right? Those, if you think about it, those are the least likely to be incremental, because
already know the brand.
Yeah, this person probably went there to buy the brand already. It's not an incremental sale, but it will be a sale that gets attributed, and it makes ROAS look good. Right? So a lot of dollars go there. And frankly, like e-commerce folks know this. And yet if they got to hit a ROAS number, like they're going to put the dollars into what can hit that number. So that's an organizational incentive problem. I would start shifting, if I really want to grow sales, I would start shifting a lot more into the upper funnel formats on site, sponsored brand video. And then I would really lean into in-store ads now, because it's so nascent. To me, this is the early arbitrage opportunity for brands. Plus, you get all the learnings about how to make it work and drive sales for you now. that's going to pay off much more in the future. And then for offsite, I think we're at this moment with streaming TV and Amazon Prime Video ads that, I mean, this is like the convergence of the two biggest trends in marketing over the last 50 years, TV and performance advertising, right? Brands should be all over this. And it's been a little bit slower uptake so far than I've thought. So I just think that's where the money's going to be made.
We know what to do as a brand. We'll see how the investment plays out. To your point about measurement earlier, now these are much more measurable surfaces also. So that presumably will keep driving more investment. I want to get to predictions for 2025. Before I do that, any surprises in terms of companies? Obviously, we've seen Amazon recently announce their ad technology being available to other retailers. What surprised you the most in the space?
Surprise. Oh, I'll say broadly, one of my big learnings or takeaways from the year, because I haven't spent my career inside of brands or retailers, the organizational issues, alignment, incentives hold so much of the opportunity back. People aren't incentivized to think about the things that they probably should be. So just realizing how much friction that presents and how that holds back certain trends that, to me kind of look obvious where things should go. But I'm also recognizing it's going to take longer than I think it should to get there. I guess the biggest news, it was a surprise at the moment, was Walmart's acquisition of Vizio. And significant in part because I think now that you have two big horses in this race with Amazon and Walmart, right? They always push the market forward when they're directly competing head to head. I always say they both benefit from competition. It's not a zero-sum game. They end up lapping the rest of the competition, but it also pulls the whole market forward. So to me, that's really going to be an accelerant to that market. And listen, we had to wait this entire year for the acquisition to close. It happened early in the year. It didn't close to the very end of the year. So now, the heavy lifting on Walmart's side is starting to happen. They have to connect the pipes. They have to, incorporate it into Walmart Connect and all of those sorts of things. So we're just really at the precipice of this thing taking off.
Beyond retail media, what are some of your predictions for this year?
Yeah. So the broad theme for the year, I said 2025 is going to be the year of full funnel retail media. Retail media has, I would say, almost been pigeonholed into performance. It certainly grew up around performance, but where things are going is, I think my thesis here is that the future of retail media is the future of all media. Retail media is, I'm quoting Connor McKenna here from Luma Partners. He says retail media is both a channel and a layer. So e-commerce would be the channel piece of it. The layer is it's this data and closed loop targeting and measurement that is becoming infused into almost every major pool of advertising spend. So I think that we're going to see that manifest in bigger ways where the upper funnel and the lower funnel come together in ways where it's clear where things are going to start to go it hasn't quite crystallized yet, but I think it will. So the three things that I put as the kind of sub bullets to this point about full funnel are one, the rise of streaming TV, as I just alluded to, right? Amazon has opened up the inventory. Advertisers can now invest in this, and they're going to start to understand that you can be more targeted. It's going to bring new advertisers into TV that have never been there before, and they're going to be able to follow it through to performance. And I think that's revolutionary for TV advertising. The next one is publisher retail media partnerships. We saw a big one land with Best Buy and CNET. We saw Instacart partner with New York Times Cooking. I think the action is starting to heat up in publisher world and thinking about applications of it for themselves. So I think we're going to see more movement of that happen this year. And then the last one is in-store. I've been talking about in-store broadly as a trend, but I think it doesn't become real until people start to see it all around them. And it's taken a few years for retailers to really get to the point where they're ready to roll it out in a bigger way. And this is the year where some bigger retailers are going to do it in a more pronounced way, where you're seeing it start to proliferate in regional grocery quite a bit. And when it stares people in the face, they start to understand that Um, Physical store is really the next major media channel.
These are your predictions, themes for 2025. These are amazing. We'll come back in a year, check in with you. I would love it if you have specific predictions, anything we should specifically be thinking about for this year that might happen.
Wait, you can't hold me accountable to these predictions.
I'm all about measurement.
So the specific predictions, this is something that we started doing a few years ago at eMarketer. And the idea behind it was, I don't know if folks remember Scott Galloway, before he became, the entity that he is today. He made this prediction that Amazon would acquire Whole Foods. I think he made this in 2017, and it was maybe a matter of months later that it actually happened. I mean, that is a specific prediction that was exactly right. So it's fun to speculate on some of these things. So they're probably going to be wrong. I mean, the chances that you're right are so small. But what I like about doing them is there's a logic behind it. And if you can take away the logic of the prediction, you'll probably see something that's somewhat parallel to that actually happen over the course of the year. So the first prediction I'm going to make here is that we're going to see a streaming TV partnership between Best Buy and Disney Plus. And the logic behind it is actually pretty simple. Best Buy just hired their new GM of their advertising business, Lisa Valentino, who comes from Disney. So a deep water media person. Best Buy is obviously the brand in a major consumer category. They have a Roku partnership, but I don't think anything beyond that. It just makes perfect sense to bring those two together and to be able to incorporate really good consumer electronics data into Disney Plus advertising. So, right, sometimes the reading the tea leaves is about the individuals who are at play.
Yeah.
My second one is I think that Target's going to get its groove back in retail more broadly, but specifically in retail media as well. With the specific things that I think they're going to really take to the next level is their loyalty program. Target's always engendered great loyalty. They're starting to invest more and get more serious about Target Circle. But I think they haven't quite hit that moment where they have the incentives that really capture the imagination of consumers who probably want to be loyal in terms of a paid loyalty program or membership program. So I think what they're going to do is play to their strengths, which is they're always the best place for brands like Starbucks, Disney, Lego. I think that there is a version of their membership program that will provide incentives around some of those great brands. So when you picture Target Circle, you picture these great brands in your mind's eye, and these are things that can apply as benefits to the whole family. Ulta, that's the other one. They've got Ulta store within a store there. And my last prediction, this is kind of the hardest one to do, and actually probably won't happen this year. But we're going to see more retail media and publisher partnerships. But I think there's also potential for M&A, right? So you could see a retailer acquiring a media brand, especially with media valuations depressed in a lot of instances. So where would that come from? I actually think if and when that happens, it's going to come out of left field. In your mind, you might be thinking about a traditional retailer like a Best Buy. What I actually think about is who's in the best position to make an acquisition like this, especially one that might go sideways. It's the tech companies. So I'm gonna take it out of left field. So in my mind, it's something like an Uber or DoorDash. So let me say DoorDash, for example. Why? Because I think they are very under the radar strategic. I think they're in a quiet way executing a really very well. They're category leader in their specific category, but are also punching above their weight in CPG. They're strategic. They have the ability to do it in a way that it's a drop in the bucket if you spend a few $100 million on something and it goes sideways. But I also think there's a lot of adjacency with people who read food publications or interested in restaurants, that you can use that as a way to onboard more people for customer acquisition. Or you could go a little bit different route and not even do it with contextually relevant content You could just say, I'm going after this demographic. This demographic goes to this content site, and we're just going to feed DoorDash ads, through that site as well. So that's the type of M&A, if and when we see it, that I think will happen.
So we've got our start with Best Buy and Disney. We've got Target with loyalty and these brands kind of coming together, and then expanding the surface through someone like DoorDash or Uber. As you mentioned, there's a lot of these strategic properties around, whether it's demographics or the contents in common with kind of their footprint. Yeah, I love these. So I'll be back in a year. We'll have you back on, and we'll see. And I imagine you may be getting a few phone calls right after this show goes live to consult on some of these ideas. So these are really great. Well, Andrew, we've got some great topics that we've covered. Quick question: CES, you were just there. What was the news? What are the big takeaways?
It was my first time there. I don't exactly have something to compare it to, but it was retail media central. I think it's first off, consumer electronics. It comes more out of retail and consumer electronics industries. Obviously, it's become something of a boondoggle in the media and advertising space. I thought it would be much more dispersed and broadly in media and advertising, and I would say it was very overweighted to retail media specifically. So the fact that it started to take center stage is interesting. Meetings to be had across the board. I never actually went. I didn't pay for a pass and didn't go to any of the content or anything else. It was just meetings. But I thought it was a really good conference. Takeaways are, I think, along the lines of a lot of what we talked about, thinking about what's next, and kind of the increasing integration of media and retail media.
It's great. So all retail media all the time. I've got some rapid fire questions, rapid retail questions to wrap up with for you, and I'll try and make them so that they are can be answered in a word or two here. First one is: which company is generally considered the first to implement retail media?
Oh, Amazon or Walmart.
There you go.
Encounter with them was in 2012, and I actually saw display ads on Amazon for P&G and craft ads on Walmart at the exact same time. So Walmart was powered by Triad. I actually don't know. It's close. My business partner from who formerly ran Best Buy ads would actually say Best Buy because they actually go way back to the beginnings of it in like 2008 or 2009.
Could be any of those. Which company increased its in-store retail media inventory the most in 2024?
First thing that was in my mind is Hy-Vee. They invested in 10,000 screens, and clearly the biggest bet in in-store retail media, I think, of any retailer today. But we're going to have national retailers that are going to start doing it in a bigger way this year. So that remains to be seen. But I'm excited about a few.
Could be Hy-Vee, could be Walmart. We'll check the numbers and report back. Now, which company used Visibubble technology to create an interactive campaign in Kaufland stores to celebrate Children's Day?
Got me on that one.
All right. That's a tough one. Thanks to our producer for putting this fun one in here. The answer is Lego on that one. And last but not least, which supermarket chain has leveraged customer loyalty data to provide personalized product recommendations through its in-store digital screens?
Personalized? I mean, Kroger is the first place that I go on data.
I'm gonna go with you on Kroger on that one because of that. You think about 8451 and the loyalty programs and all that.
But when I say personalized, what my head goes is Instacart, because Instacart has rolled out smart carts.
Right.
Amazon is the other one too. So in that instance of personalization,
could have all three. Yeah.
The one I'll mention in the mix is Sam's Club, because they're really ahead of the pack in terms of mobile.
All right. These are great. Thanks for playing along for our rapid retail round there. Now, before we wrap up, I'd love to ask you, you're making some hefty predictions, some fun predictions. what do you do when you're not making predictions? Hobbies? How do you keep it light? What do you do for fun? Things like that.
Well, part of me is such a nerd. I do spend a lot of time thinking about, reading about stuff in the industry. But real life with my family, my weekends are completely monopolized by both of my kids playing travel basketball now. I've got a fifth grader doing it, and my second grader started playing this year. And something that is really only relevant and exciting to me this weekend, both of my kids are going to be playing together in the same game. My second grader is going to be playing up with the fourth graders, and my fifth grader will be playing down with the fourth graders. They shift players around when they need extra bodies. So it just so happens that they're going to play together. They actually root for each other, which is cool. So I'm excited to see it happen.
Amazing. I can't think of a better note to end on. Andrew, if our listeners want to reach you, find out more about your predictions, what you're working on, talk with you, what's the best way for them to find you online?
My publication, Media Ads and Commerce, which is Media Ads and Commerce spelled out, .substack.com. That's where I publish all my articles. And then LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn regularly. Just come find me, connect with me, hopefully follow my content, teach me something new. I always love when people tell me something I don't know.
We'll make sure to put those links in the show notes. Andrew, thank you so much for talking with me today. A true inspiration. I learned a ton, and I had a lot of fun talking with you. So thanks again.
Likewise, and thank you so much for having me back.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Beyond the Shelf is brought to you by It's Rapid. It's Rapid is the platform Pepsi, Sierra Nevada, Revlon, and hundreds of other leading brands and retailers use to build personalized content at scale. Whether that's images, videos, or product descriptions for their product detail pages, shoppable videos or banners for their digital ad campaigns, or sell sheets for sales enablement, brands that use It's Rapid are able to produce high-quality, on-brand content on average more than 80% faster than category competitors. To find out more, please visit itsrapid.ai. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Shelf.